The Coast Guard that has ended the search and rescue operations when it comes to the 6 people who were on the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore when it collapsed. The governor there has said that it was a very heartbreaking conclusion after the Coast Guard ended that search and rescue operations for those 6 people who were said to believe to have been on that bridge when it collapsed. The collapse occurred after a massive container ship lost its power early on Tuesday and crashed into the bridge, sending people and vehicles into the river. The governor has said ahead of the collision, the crew notified officials with a mayday call that allowed authorities to stop traffic before the impact as far as the people and traffic on that bridge is concerned. So that in turn saved many lives. The container ship that rammed a bridge into the US Baltimore, this is causing it to collapse almost entirely and sending cars and people plunging into the river below, was manned entirely by a crew of Indians. We're talking about 22 members of that crew. Several vehicles and nearly 20 people are believed to have, this is, the initial reports of 8 people who went into the river and 2 were rescued. However, 6 people who are believed to be missing, but search operations have now been stopped. Well, the United States is reacting to this and saying, especially it is Joe Biden who's gone on to say that it wasn't an intentional attack, it wasn't a targeted attack, but, let's just listen in to what Joe Biden had to say.
And so this evening at about 7:30, we are going to suspend the active search and rescue efforts. Coast Guard's not going away, none of our partners are going away, but we're just going to transition to a different phase.
Everything so far indicates that this was a terrible accident. At this time, we have no other indication, no other reason to believe there's any intentional act here. Personnel on board the ship were able to alert the Maryland Department of Transportation that they had lost control of their vessel, as you all know and reported. As a result, local authorities were able to close the bridge to traffic before the bridge was struck, which undoubtedly saved lives.
And to get more on this, let's just get in Emily Opilo, who is joining us to get us more on this. She is the reporter, the Sun reporter, who is going to take us through what really happened. First questions first. What really happened? Take us through, this bridge that got knocked down by this huge container.
Most Baltimoreans woke up this morning to the news that the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which is a major artery here in Baltimore since the 1970s, had collapsed around 1:30 this morning. The bridge was struck by a massive container ship. The impact was very loud. It could be heard from the shores on either side of the Patapsco River, which is the waterway that feeds Baltimore's harbor. And the first crews on the scene pulled 2 people from the harbor, one who walked away without injury and refused any kind of medical treatment, and another who was taken to an area hospital with very serious injuries, were how they were described. And then throughout the day, Tuesday, rescue crews searched the waters around the collapse site in search of about 6 more people who they believed to be missing. Those people are believed to be employees of a construction company that was working on the span when it collapsed. They were doing concrete work. And as of around 6 p.m. this evening, an official with Bronner Builders, that's the company that employed those men, said they are now presumed dead. So we have switched to a recovery mission at this point.
Right. Very heartbreaking news when it comes to the rescue operations that have been stopped. Tell us something about the crew. It was an all-Indian crew members that were on board. 22 of them, if you could tell us, we believe they're said to be safe.
The ship that hit the bridge is known as the Dali. It's registered in Singapore. All 22 of the Dali's crew are Indian. Authorities said that crew, as well as 2 local pilots who were on board the ship to help guide it in and out of the harbor, have been accounted for. There are no reports of injuries on the ship at this time. And we interviewed some local residents today who spent the weekend with some of those crew members, actually, while they were docked in Baltimore. A local church ministry meets with crew members on a lot of these large ships and helps them get around town. And they took the members shopping to Walmart. And they were stocking up, is what those officials said, for a long trip that the crew had ahead. The ship is headed to Sri Lanka next, or was to be headed to Sri Lanka, which is a 28-day voyage from Baltimore.
Well, Emily, it was a Mayday call that the governor has said has helped save so many lives. Take us through, the kind of disaster and the kind of fatalities that were averted due to that Mayday call.
Just ahead of the collision, the ship, which again was being steered by a local harbor pilot at that point, issued a Mayday call, which means that it had lost all power, it had lost the ability to steer, and that gave the transportation authorities that got that Mayday call just enough time to try to close the bridge deck above it, which they were able to do to many of the cars that were going to be crossing it. But the Key Bridge is quite long. It's a 1.5 miles long. So as you might imagine, it takes quite a while for a car to cross. So there is potential that there were some cars that were on board, but that Mayday call, the governor of Maryland said today, probably saved a lot of lives.
Well, Emily, we've heard Joe Biden say that this wasn't an intentional attack, so ruling out an act of terrorism.
Correct. Yeah. First thing this morning, that was one of the first questions that we had, was whether this could be an act of terrorism. Baltimore is an international port. But early this morning, I was at a press conference at about 6 a.m. this morning, our time, and they were already ruling out, officials were already ruling out that as a possibility. The police chief here in town said that was not something they were considering. That was backed up by the governor of Maryland and eventually President Biden during his press conference later today.
Emily Pilo, Baltimore Sun reporter, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast.